Now I'll call upon all the brothers, inshallah, to come up. Yes. So this section, inshallah, is going to be a question and answer session. We're going to open it up. Any questions that you have or anything like that, we're here to be of assistance, inshallah. And there's 4 of us, so if one of us can't answer, the other one should be able to do so, inshallah. Yeah, so you can ask any question you want that you might feel like, within reason. Obviously, we're not going to give you a fatwa here, but within reason, ask whatever questions you want around this topic or any topic that you feel comfortable, asking questions about. Yes.
I would like to ask about. Wait for the mic.
Oh, sorry.
My question is about why liberalism is problematic from democracy point of view.
So the question was, how can liberalism be problematic from a democratic point of view? Don't forget, there are different types of democracy and different kinds of liberalism. I think we should be clear about that to begin with. So the initial democracy that was put forward by the ancient Greeks, which comes from the 2 Greek words demos and kratia, basically literally means people power. People power. And it took a direct form. So in other words, people would come up and they would try and answer public questions, etc. Then it evolved into representative democracy because it was very difficult for that to be maintained, for basically a whole populace of, let's say, 1 million people, to answer, every little question that they have in terms of politics, etc. It would be unimplementable. Social liberalism, economic liberalism, and political liberalism are problematic in so much as the following. Number 1, in democracy, the assumption is that you have 1 vote per person. Yes. In liberalism, the equality premise also stands. So there's something in connection with those 2 things. In implementation, most, if not, I'm not going to say all, but the vast majority of countries that have democratic systems, they have a system of what you call electoral representation. So I'll give you an example of Great Britain. They have something called first past the post. First past the post. I don't want to go into too much detail, but the idea is if you vote for a bigger party, a bigger political party, you have more of a voice. If you vote for example, we have a party called the Green Party, you have less voice. So the bigger the party that you vote for, the more you have of a voice. But that contradicts the equality premise of liberalism, because how and why should you be given a higher voice just because you support a bigger party? That's why smaller parties, they want proportional representation. But the problem still stands. How can you maintain equality and at the same time have a democratic system which is completely unequal from that perspective? This is one of many examples in implementation. Other things include, for example, in relation to economic liberalism. Once again, the democratic premise is that we should have equality among citizens, even though, ironically, in the beginning, they didn't allow women to vote, They didn't allow women to, they called them the idiom, I think. It's like the women, the children, and the slaves, they couldn't vote back in the days until 1917, whatever it was, in Great Britain, and then thereafter in other countries. I think Canada was actually first. Anyways, the point is that, yes, so with democracy from that perspective, we said that the equality premise couldn't stand with liberalism, because liberalism is in the pluralism of many ideas, panoply of ideas. You're going to have some ideas which have more power than others. For example, in electoral campaigns, those who have more money, economic money, are going to be able to do more media campaigns and so on. And so they're going to be able to have a bigger campaign, and the democratic rights of those with smaller parties are once again going to be curtailed. So equality is a problem for both democracy and liberalism. And you can't maintain equality and either democracy or liberalism. This is a problem. So both of those things can contradict at times. Does that make sense? I can give you some more answers, but inshallah that will be another longer question. Do you want to add to it, inshallah?
Any other questions? I think there's one of that.
Okay, that one first and then.
Thank you for the very enlightening talk. My question, or maybe comment as well, many agree that the Muslim Ummah is suffering from the crisis, intellectual crisis and also spiritual crisis, ranging from caused by extremism, radicalism and liberalism, branch out from neo-modernism. This group, namely liberal Muslim, has liberalized or have liberalized Sharia, liberalized Aqidah, and also the Quran. And the other problem as well is that there is another group, conservatism, which undermine the role of reason. So these are the phenomena today, which is in either case, give problem to the Ummah. What is your comment on that? Thank you.
Got a question?
You can add to it if you want.
Mansur.
They won't answer.
Sorry, was that a question or a comment?
Your comments.
Okay, so what exactly was the question? I mean, I know.
The question is that the role of neo-liberal Muslim, like liberal Islam in the case of Indonesia, for example, that liberalized Sharia, which is very serious, liberalized Aqidah, which they introduced religious pluralism, and so on and so forth, which is very serious and challenging to the Aqidah of Muslim.
Okay, so I believe you mean like they're trying to self-interpret the Quran and the Sharia as they see fit in the society.
Yes, they are too liberal in interpreting the Sharia and the Quran and other fundamental belief of Islam.
Yeah, I mean, you want to? Yeah, go on, please.
What I think it is it's a case of when a nation becomes weak, they like to imitate those who are in power. Liberalism, there's no such thing as liberalism, Islam. Islam is we submit to God's will according to our sources. So liberalism is something that there are certain Muslims who want to whitewash Islam to please the colonialist masters. We're still suffering from colonialism. This is the after effects of a couple of centuries of being ruled by dominant forces, and we're still affected mentally to this day. And because of that, we get other Muslims who go to the other extreme to counteract the liberals, and they end up being extremists. In Surah 2, Ayah 143, we are told to be a middle nation. We shouldn't be liberals, we shouldn't be extreme, we should be in a middle path, which is follow the Quran and the Sunnah and do not give your own opinion, but judge according to what the sources say. That's the only way to be successful as a ummah, by trying to work out what is Allah's will regarding any matter, and not trying to force our own opinions and thoughts on our sources.
Is that good enough, sister?
Thank you.
Because obviously, I mean, the deen is something that we shouldn't interpret ourselves as we have got the ulamas. We have got something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He sent messengers, and these messengers were appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they imparted not only the message that was revealed to them from Allah, but they also implemented in their life with the actions, like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and also the messengers before them. And today we don't have any prophets, so that prophethood is no more after the last messenger, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And now we have their ulamas, and they are the ones who are responsible in terms of interpreting and also educating the masses. And if the young people and also the others, if they stop basically taking knowledge from these qualified ulamas, then they will be basically lost, because they'll start interpreting, and everything is subjective then. You don't have any uniform way of practicing anything in your deen. Even the 5 pillars, they'll have some sort of self-interpretation. We have certain sects called the hadith rejectors today, and these people, what they do is like they interpret the Quranic ayahs by themselves. So you ask them how many rakahs you pray, and they tell you, oh, we just pray somehow, anyhow we want. Basically, Allah tells us to pray, but He doesn't specify how many rakahs, so we just pray how many we want, when we want, so on. I mean, not exactly, like I said, even they amongst themselves do not agree about the rulings of these particular things. So yeah, I think taking the knowledge from the ones who are more knowledgeable, this is also something that's advised in the Quran, and the ulamas, I think, fit that particular description. Inshallah, I mean, hopefully that answers your question. Assalamu
alaikum. I have 2 questions. Number 1 is, how did liberalism idea get so successful? Which methodologies did they use for bringing their Dawah in, first of all in the West, among their own population, and then exporting to also other countries? Number 2 is, as Muslim, what can we learn from the Dawah or the job? Can we use the method to our own Dawah, spreading Islam with the same way?
You want to take that? You give the first one, you answer the second one.
I'll answer the first one, inshallah, and Mansur will answer the second one. So, why did it become very successful? Is because of the wars that made it very successful. For the most part, there is a degree of acceptance, social acceptance as well. So we can't be completely one-sided in our response here. Some of the wars include, obviously, the colonization of the Americas in particular. That was a very, very important thing. I mean, after the Age of Discovery, and they found, because the Age of Discovery and all those things that happened coincided with the time when liberalism was becoming popular. And when new nations were being built now, for example, United States of America and France in particular, those 2 nations, when they were being built and they had their own kind of documents, legislative documents or constitutional documents, even in the case of both of those countries, they made it quite liberal. I mean, it is a liberal state in a sense, right? And when we say liberal here, we're not talking about left-leaning politics. We're talking about the philosophical liberalism of John Locke, Montesquieu, Voltaire, and so on. And so therefore, obviously, checks and balances, separation of powers, that was all there. Social liberalism became very popular after that as well. So, first and foremost, the colonial expansion into the Americas, the establishment of those nations as, in a sense, liberal states, and then thereafter, the Napoleonic Wars, which were very much barbaric, to use words that they would use for religious wars, very successful at the same time, and obviously very influential in the spread of liberalism, not only in the Western world, because obviously the Napoleonic Wars were in the West, but also into the Eastern world. As you guys know, Napoleon went into Egypt and many of those countries as well, and there's many records of how Egypt was liberalized through such an invasion. And obviously the colonial experience. I mean, when England, or Britain, as it was known, the British Empire, became the largest empire in the whole world, France was not close behind, far away behind, and all those European nations colonized the world. Liberal ideas then trickled down into Africa and into Asia and into the Middle East and so on. So all of those things that happened, obviously, and there's a degree of social acceptance. And don't forget, it's a very attractive ideology as well. Let's be honest. I mean, the reason why liberalism is a very attractive ideology is because it appeals to your sense of impulse. Yes, I mean, totally. I mean, liberalism appeals to your sense. Just do it. Enjoy your life. All those things. I mean, that's a very, very powerful ideology from a psychological perspective. Just giving someone the ability, or perceived freedom, but the ability to experiment in all those ways that were once seen as taboo. So, because it's quite an attractive ideology from that perspective as well, it was accepted, and people don't want to leave it for, let's say, for example, more restrictive ideology. It's difficult to go from this lifestyle to that lifestyle. So, for all of those reasons, I think liberalism has become quite successful. And don't forget, there were wars like the Cold War, which polarized the world in a sense, liberalism versus communism. People were forced to choose. There was a great deal of ideological pressures that the United States of America in particular put into the media project, films being made, Hollywood, Bollywood, whatever it is. I don't know what they have here in Turkey. Do they have an alternative? It's Hollywood, something like that, yeah? And so on, right? So that's what's happened. So all of those factors combined make it pretty much the dominant paradigm or dominant ethic in the West.
The education system.
And the education system, education system, all those things. And I think that's what's made it successful.
Just moving on from there, you see, to remedy a problem, first it's important to understand the cause of the problem. Right? Often we don't realize what problems are associated with liberalism, and because of not understanding that this is a problem, because liberalism, or the idea of, one can individually choose or even collectively choose as individuals, because it seems to give progress, because you now have unlimited free thought. Your thoughts are not somehow restricted anymore. You can just do, you can just want, you can just wish, whatever. Of course, there are some limitations imposed by the society for reasons, society function of the society. But the appeal is there because you have no restrictions. Because as Brother Muhammed Hijab pointed out, the reason why it's appealing, because it's going through your impulses, because you feel like you want to be happy, right? You want to have enjoyment. You want your wants and desires, then it's like never end of it. So one of the things you will see Islam also highlights is the purification of yourself, where you somehow realize internally that there are going to be this dichotomy between what I want and what I should not do, because there is do's and don'ts. As a Muslim, when you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what have you done is you are sincerely saying, I willingly submit. What does submission means? You've already surrendered. What have you surrendered from? Who have you surrendered to? There's a surrendering of your will. Now that will be willingness to do something what Allah has already commanded not to do, right? You are saying, no, I am surrendering my will to what Allah and His Messenger wants. So when we look at this idea of liberalism, of course it's going to appeal to everyone, and especially people who are irreligious, who have no religion whatsoever. They don't have any belief in a deity or God or a creator. What they have is their own self, what their self wants. Of course, to them success is what makes them happy. If wealth makes them happy, they will want to be wealthy. If power makes them happy, they want to be more powerful. If dominating others makes them happy, they want to be more dominant than others. That's why the people go into war, because they have their power and their land, but they still want to go and expand on others and have more power, right? So, looking at the Islamic perspective, as Muslims, if we know that this struggle between the needs and the wants and what we shouldn't do, because we are created here for a reason, first and foremost. The reason we are existing is because Allah placed us in this world for a reason. That a purpose is set, you fulfill this purpose, and then you will have successful afterlife in Jannah, where there's eternal happiness, joy, bliss, tranquility, and peace. So you have to maintain the boundaries that is set. Now boundaries means what? Restrictions, isn't it? Whenever we have a boundary, it means a restriction. You will be restricted from unlimited enjoyment, unlimited greed, unlimited envy, unlimited, all of these things, there will be restrictions. So Muslims need to reclaim their Islamic understanding, right? You need to go back to what makes a Muslim, what is a Muslim, why are we Muslims in the first place? Then you will realize these ideologies that they are coming through, yes, you can combat them. You're saying, look, these ideologies are actually ideologies of the nafs. It is all about making your nafs do whatever your nafs wants to do, yourself, your soul wants to do. As Muslims, as we return to Quran and Sunnah, you will be within a boundary, and that boundary is your protection. Now, I was speaking to a brother there earlier on saying how the hudud, the boundaries that Islam provides in terms of what we can't do what we're not allowed to do, whether it's to do with, even violating other people's rights. Imagine you like someone's car and you say, I'm going to have it by force. I mean, you can't do that because you're violating the rights of someone else. So there has to be this restriction. Now, how does Islam maintain and preserve this boundary? By setting up certain rules and regulations. And of course, some people won't like these rules and regulations because it restricts them, restricts their freedom from getting it. Okay? So when you have a boundary, the hudud, and Islam is practiced within it, you will be safe. Safe from what? You'll be safe from the shackles that will be put through to you artificially by your own desires. Because your desires will make you its slave. You will be slave to your desires. You want to be slave to Allah. Yeah? So when you practice the hudud, implement the hudud in your lives, and you will see how the society functions. So when you have laws of crime and punishment, for example, of course the liberals and others will see it as very, very harsh. Of course they will, because it's a very severe punishment of, say, stealing. Why cutting off the hands of a thief? It's not just a normal punishment, is it? It's a very, very harsh punishment. Cutting off a hand is harsh punishment. Of course, the reasons are there to protect the individual and protect the society. Because I'll give you an example. Imagine the punishment for murder was 10 Turkish lira. Is it going to stop murdering? Because there are individuals out there who are very angry, very emotional, and they don't like you say, I've got 20 lira in my pocket. And if 10 lira is a punishment for murder, I can get away with 2 murders. It is not going to somehow give them this deterrent effect. Yeah? But if it was like, look, if you murder someone, you will be hanged or electrified or crucified, whatever, you'll be killed by the hands of justice. That individual will think twice. Yeah? So there is a deterrent effect. So Islamic punishment system, when the liberals looked at it like this is very harsh, this is backdated, barbaric, how can you do that? Because that's what you'll hear. Backdated, outdated, very harsh. The reasons are there. Because it has a very powerful deterrent effect. Go back to Islamic history and see how many people were punished, how many hands were chopped off when Islam was implemented in its entirety. That's what we should be looking at. So when you concentrate on this understanding of how Islam provides this boundary, it's for a reason. It is for the betterment of the society, and of course it will make you successful in the hereafter. So as Muslims then, what are our roles and responsibilities? What are our concerns? We need to go back to the understanding of Islam. We need to really say, look, I can understand there are alternatives put forward. They're very appealing alternatives. Okay? Very appealing. Appealing to what? Emotions. But is it appealing to reason? Look at the Islamic society, the Islamic model, the Islamic framework. Contextually, as a whole, holistically. Compare with all the other models and see which models is just and fair and practical. That's what we should be doing. Because unless you compare and say, look, these ideas that you're giving about liberalism, as we have learned today, it contradicts on so many levels, even in societal aspects. But people still push forward this view because it's like an appealing alternative. What other alternatives are there? Islam, perhaps? The best alternative? No, we would say Islam is not the best alternative. Islam is the solution. That is how our mindset should be. That we should think that Islam is not providing an alternative. Remember, every time we have a discussion, we're thinking like, okay, let me give you an alternative. No, you're not giving an alternative. You're giving the solution. All the others are alternatives. And you see how the alternative, which one is a better alternative or not. And talking about backwardness and outdatedness, is democracy a new thing? Isn't that very, very backward, very outdated, thousands of years ago? And people are fighting for democracy. So it's not about how old the system is that makes it impractical for the society now. If that was the case, then everyone would have left democracy a long time ago. So Islam, just because it's 1439, 40 years ago, it doesn't mean it is not suitable today. It doesn't mean it cannot compete with the ideas of liberalism, the ideas of hedonism, whatever, materialism, all these concepts where it is free from the reality of worshipping Allah as He should be worshipped. Because we are here for a reason. Let's not forget that. So, just summarizing the responsibilities and the things that we should do as Muslims. Number one, understand that we are Muslims. That's our identity. Islam is our identity. Yes, you can be born Turkish. Yes, you can be born a Pakistani or an Arab. Okay, that you can have this ethnic identity. But you chose to be a Muslim still today. That is what your identity should be. I am a Muslim because I've surrendered to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Since I have surrendered, then comes the next point. I will, of course, have some boundaries and limitations. And I will, of course, maintain those boundaries and limitations. And I will make sure that people understand why there are boundaries, why there are restrictions, why there are not assimilations between Islam and other. But there could be integration possible, but never assimilation. So do not assimilate into the ideas of all these isms. Maintain the boundary that you are a Muslim. And yes, I can be Muslim and I can be progressive. I can be Muslim and I can still have reason. Going back to the sister when you asked this question, that the conflict between conservatism and total, ideas of liberalism. No, Islam, as the brother said, is in the middle. We are ummatan wasata. We are in the middle where we do use reason, but the reason has limitations. We do use our intellect. We do use our ideas, what we call ijtihad, where we developed newer systems, newer models, newer framework based on the existing one that is provided from the Quran and Sunnah. So we are not going to say we have to choose either this end of total, literal conservatism, where there is no reason, we just follow blindly, or totally abandon everything and just go by reason only. No, come back in the middle. And that's where the solution is.